just want to welcome you, no matter who you are, whether you come every single week or if you're a guest. I do want to give kind of a special shout out to the guests. If you're here this morning, I just want to thank you. I know that it can be awkward, it can be uncomfortable to go somewhere new. You don't know what to experience or what you're to expect. And so I just want to thank you for stepping outside your comfort zone and joining us this morning. We're really grateful that you are here. If you are willing to, we would love to have you fill out a connection card from the seat back and the seat in front of you. It's just a way of us knowing that you were here, and it just allows us to be praying for you and allows us to thank God just for allowing you to be present with us this morning. We're going to be speaking today from our primary chapter that we're going to look at is from Matthew chapter 13. So if you want to look that up, you can hold that. I'll get there in a few minutes. If you're using one of the Bibles from the chair in front of you, that's going to be on page 1484. So you can look that up and just kind of hold that in readiness. So let me just kind of set the stage here real quick in terms of where we are today. Last week, we looked at how the Jewish people misunderstood the promise of God. Everything that they saw when they heard all the prophecies, all the promises regarding a coming king, Messiah, Savior, Emmanuel, every time they heard any one of those words, in their mind what they pictured was a king that would sit on the throne and make Israel a powerful nation. And never again would they be under the oppression of a foreign king. What they didn't understand was that every single time that God made one of those promises, every single time that God prophesied about the coming Messiah, the Savior of the world, what he was prophesying about was a king who was going to come and help us as people break the reign of oppression that our sin has on our lives. See, they were trying to look through the lens of a nation, and God was trying to look through the lens of people that he cherishes, people that he cared for. And this morning, what we're going to talk a little bit about is people that he cared enough about that he came out of heaven to physically be with us so that there was no distance, there was no doubt, there was no misunderstanding of who Jesus was and what he was about. Unfortunately, even though he took all that effort for us to fully understand him, this morning we are going to talk a little bit about how sometimes people today still misunderstand who Jesus is and the relationship that he wants with each one of us. So Christmas is one of those times of the year where this is for most people around the world, no matter where you go, this is for most people the most joyous time of all. It's the time with all the music, the lights, the decoration, the party, the family gathering, the Christmas cards, and even occasionally a Christmas gift gets thrown into the mix of that. But Christmas is probably the time when you hear and see people the most joyous and the most generous. Christmas just seems of all times of the year to bring out the best in people. It brings out the best in terms of how we view our family and how we relate to them, but it also just tends to bring out the best in us in terms of how we relate to people that we don't even know. I love all the stories you hear about people just being generous to somebody that they don't even know. They just know that they're hurting in some way, and they step into that void and they say, I have the ability to kind of help meet that. I love that. The challenge is that while we think of Christmas as this incredibly beautiful, joyous time, it wasn't that way always. If you think about it, for Mary and Joseph, Christmas was one of the most confusing, challenging, difficult seasons of their entire life. Because there was a census that was being taken, they had to leave where they were living in Nazareth, and they had to travel to Bethlehem while Mary's about 9.5 months pregnant, and that would have been about a 4 to 7 day journey. 4 if people were healthy and able to make good time, and probably 7 if somebody is a little bit pregnant, maybe not moving at quite this normal speed. So after this travel, with all of this going on, and it's like, why do we need to go? Why do we have to go? This is not the best time. Why can't we just, mail in our ballot, for the census? But they didn't have that back then. They couldn't zoom in and tell them, hey, we're there, kind of a thing. So they had to do all the travel. Finally, they get to Bethlehem, and they're just thinking, okay, all we need to do now is just go to the Bethlehem Inn and just get one room. That's all we need. And yet that isn't quite the way it worked out. So read with me, if you would, what it says in Luke chapter 6, verse 6 and 7. It'll be up on the screen for you. And it says, while they were there, the time came for her to give birth. And she gave birth to her firstborn son, and she wrapped him in cloths and laid him in a manger because there was no room for them in the inn. Now, I just got to tell you, it is not fair what we've done to the manger. If you think about it, if you've watched any of the great Christmas movies, if you've looked at any of the Christmas cards in the mail, what you see is that everywhere, every stable has completely fresh straw that is clean. It has no animal leftovers. It's beautiful. The animals are all finely groomed. The animals, this is the incredible part. Okay, I had some friends who did some work in Hollywood, so they taught me this. The thing that's incredible about the animals is they even knew how to pose for the picture. Have you noticed that? But let's be honest with ourselves. That was not the experience that Mary had. Mary has come to what is supposed to be one of the most incredible moments of her life, the birth of her firstborn son, and she's stuck in a stable. She's stuck in a stable with all the smell, with all these loud animals that just keep stomping all over everything, that have no sense of decor or understanding of what's taking place. And Mary is sitting there going, what did I do to deserve all this? I know from an angel that this is clearly from God. I know from my own physical experience that I have been impregnated with the Holy Spirit to give birth to Jesus, but why is it like this? Why isn't this just the most honoring, glorifying, highlight of my life? And so it wasn't always the same. And then they get there, and the innkeeper, Mary, is just sitting there going, I just want a good night of sleep. I just need some rest. I'm tired. I'm sore. I've been walking. I just want a good night of rest. Joseph is sitting there feeling just completely powerless. I wish I could do more for Mary. I wish there was a way I could get her a room. I wish there was a way I could get her some rest. I wish I could go through some of this for her and make this pregnancy and the birth and delivery and everything easier for her. And I feel totally powerless to do anything for her. And then there's the innkeeper who just is oblivious. He's got no clue what's going on, okay? He is ecstatic. I got every single room filled, plus I booked an extra room out in the stable. Man, if they had Christmas bonuses, I'd be getting one this year. He just has no clue. But think about it. There was no way when this young couple stands in front of him and he sees this young woman pregnant, there was no way that he understood that she was about to give birth to Jesus, who would be God in the flesh. And so he just sends them to the stable. Now, knowing what we know today, I think we would respond differently. I know I would, okay? I mean, if I was the innkeeper, I'm telling you what, they'd have got a room. You know what I mean? I would have done whatever I have to do. I would have brought a rollaway into the conference room. I would have put partitions up in the lobby. I would have taken a family that had 2 rooms, said, hey, you're doubling up. Here's your room. I would have taken the room with the college kids at a good party. I would have kicked them out. I mean, I would have done something, and Mary and Joseph would be in a room. You know what I'm saying? So here's one of those times where I'm going to give you that thing that you've always wanted to do in church, and the pastor never lets you do. I'm going to give you a chance to talk. Okay? Now, not to me. Okay, I want you to turn to somebody next to you and just share, what would you have done to make room for Mary and Joseph in the inn? What would you have done? Go ahead and share real quick. Okay. Unfortunately, it's too late for us to make room for Mary and Joseph in the inn. But it's not too late for you and I to decide that we're going to make room in our life for Jesus. So I just want to ask you a couple questions. I just want to get your mind thinking. I have no idea what you're going to think about these questions. I just want you to be thinking. So let me ask you a couple of questions. Is there room in your life today, or is Jesus relegated to a stable that you go and visit from time to time? What do you need to do to make room for Jesus in your life? And are you willing to do whatever it takes to make room for Jesus in your life? So I moved here 4 months ago in September. So during the summer, I was out on a day. Oh, I got to tell you, it was a beautiful day. It was a sunny, warm, 100-degree day in Phoenix, Arizona. Give me a minute. And I was just going for a couple of mile walk out in the weather, because you can do that when it's a warm, beautiful, did I mention 100 degrees? Beautiful day out. And so I'm doing this walk, and just for some reason, this thought struck me, and it's just one of those thoughts that I just couldn't get out of my mind, and it just kind of kept percolating in my mind. And so when I got back to the house, I sat down in a recliner, and yes, I grabbed some cold water and sitting there drinking the water, and I'm just sitting there thinking, I got to get this off my mind, and so I put a Facebook post in. So let me read to you what I put in my Facebook post. I said, this morning I was on a walk, and a question struck me that has stirred my curiosity. What are the most common factors that cause people to become less active in their relationship with God or His church? If this has happened to you at some point in your life, I would love to hear why. You can DM me or you can reply if you prefer. I have no desire to judge. I'm not here to argue with you. I just want to learn from others. The overwhelming number one response I got was, I just got distracted. We were having some health issues. I was traveling a lot for work. We were dealing with some family stuff. There was this little thing, I don't know if you heard about it here in Minnesota, this thing called COVID. But there were all these different reasons, none of them intentional, none of them planned, none of them sought out, none of them did they choose. They just seemed to be things that happened in their life. And then at the very end, they would always just say, and I guess I just got distracted. Now, I'll be honest. Part of what surprised me was I thought I would hear a couple people say, I'll be honest, I was praying about something and God didn't answer my prayer, and I just thought, why bother? Or I thought somebody would respond and just say, I'm just not even sure I believe in God anymore when I look at what's going on in the world around me. But I didn't get one of those. Now, that doesn't mean people don't have those struggles. That doesn't mean people don't have some of those feelings and emotions, but that wasn't what I got. Now, to be honest, I was surprised that I got distracted with the number one response. And as I thought about it, it began to dawn on me, why did that surprise me? In fact, Jesus knew this was going to be such a problem for us that He tells a story warning us about this. Now, why does He do this? Because His thinking is if I warn them about it, then they'll be less likely to let that happen in their life. For us as parents, this is those things we say to teenagers that they never say thank you for. You know, it's that thing where we're trying to warn them about something, and they're sitting there saying, no, I need to go experience it and try it for myself and see if you really do know what you're talking about. Well, I'm just here to tell you that Jesus knew what He was talking about. So let's look at Matthew chapter 13, verses 3 through 9, and Jesus is going to tell a parable. So here's what it says. He, meaning Jesus, told many stories in the form of parables, such as this one. Listen. A farmer went out to plant some seeds, and as he scattered them across the field, some seeds fell on the footpath, and the birds came and ate them. Other seed fell on the shallow soil with underlying rock, and the seeds sprouted quickly because the soil was so shallow. But the plants soon wilted under the hot sun, and since they didn't have enough deep roots, they died. Other seed fell among the thorns that grew up and choked out the tender plants. Still other seed fell on the fertile soil, and they produced a crop that was 30, 60, and even 100 times as much as what they had planted. And here's this last sentence. This is one of those sentences that Jesus would say from time to time, and it's kind of that sentence that says, hey, pay attention. He said this, anyone with ears to hear should listen and understand. Now, Jesus wanted us to get this so much that Jesus goes on, and in a few verses, He begins to explain exactly what this parable means. In other words, Jesus is saying, this one is so crucial, this one is so important, this one, I want there to be no doubt about what I'm saying. So later on, verses 18 to 23, He's going to explain it. So let me just kind of paraphrase what he says in those verses, but let me make one thing real clear so that we don't miss this. As he's talking about this farmer who's sowing seeds, a couple of things should stand out for us. One, all the seed is the same. No matter what kind of soil it falls on, the seed is the same. So it's not that there were some that got better seed and some got seed that wasn't as good. All of them got the same seed. And the seed is this. The seed is the good news that God would care so much about us that he would have his son come in the physical flesh, ultimately to live a sinless life, die on a cross for our sin, so that our sin would no longer stand in the way between us and God, that there would be no barrier, there would be nothing between us. And then he would die on that cross and 3 days later rise from the dead, so that we would know in the same way that after we die, God will be able to give life to us to spend an eternity in his presence. That's the seed that the farmer's casting. Now, listen to the four soils, and here's the unique thing. I want you to just stop and think for a moment. Every single one of us in this room, we're soil. Now, I'm going to say soil because you wouldn't like it if I called you dirt, but every single one of us is a type of soil. So you get to decide this morning as you think through this story, what's the soil that you're choosing to be? The first soil he described as the footpath. And he said, this is the soil that just doesn't understand the good news. It doesn't understand what that has to do with them. What did Jesus 2,000 years ago have to do with my life? It just makes no sense at all. And so it describes and said, so that seed is just scattered and picked up by the birds, and the seed just never takes root whatsoever. The second type of soil is what's called the rocky soil. This is the soil that I said that because the ground is so shallow, the seed kind of sprouts instantly, just kind of gets excited real quick. But the minute it has any kind of an adverse situation or challenges or difficulties, it just kind of wilts under the heat. In other words, it begins to get excited about a possible relationship with Jesus, but the minute it experiences any kind of a challenge or a disappointment, it just kind of dies underneath that. The third seed is the seed that we're really looking at today, or the third soil, and that is, it's choked out by the thorns. In other words, it hears the truth, and it begins to grow, and it begins to develop a relationship with Jesus, and it begins to look at its life. It begins to understand the overwhelming love that God has for them, but then it gets distracted. It gets distracted with busyness, and part of what it described in the passage is it gets distracted with the pursuit of wealth and all the things that it's trying to accumulate. And then the last seed, it says, is the good soil. Or the last soil is the good soil. And it says it hears the truth, it understands the truth, and it produces a crop 30, 60, or 100 times. Now, I will tell you, as long as I've been a follower of Jesus, anytime I've taught this story, nobody has ever said, pick me, I want to be soil number 3. But why does it happen so often? It doesn't happen because we're saying, I want to be soil number 3. It happens because we're saying, I'm not doing anything to ensure that I become soil number 4. You see, most people don't choose to get distracted. It's just that people make choices that lead to them being distracted. So in January, we're going to do a special 5-week series just called Undistracted. And the whole point of it is we want to do some things every single week in that series to give you some tools, to give you some habits, to give you some resources that help you make God a priority in your life so that you don't get distracted. Now, some of you got hung up on the fact that I said every week. Tom, that's 5 of them in a row, okay? I want to share a little story with you that you may not know about. But our 20th president, James Garfield, shortly after he was inaugurated president of the United States, was approached by somebody from his cabinet, and they said, we need to schedule a special meeting on Sunday because we have a major crisis approaching us that we need to deal with. And Garfield looked at him and said, I can't. We're not going to meet on Sunday. I already have an appointment. And so the cabinet member insisted a little bit more. He said, Mr. President, in all honor and all respect, this is a matter of national security. We need to meet. And if you won't meet, I want to know why. Who is it that you have an appointment with? And Garfield looked at him and said, I'll be as frank with you as you've been with me. My appointment is with my Lord and Savior around his supper in his house with his people, and I will never break that appointment. So if the President of the United States can say, I have time for that appointment, we can choose or we can choose not to make time for that appointment. So I want to encourage you, again, every single week in the month of January. Now, let's see if the Bible says anything about this, or is this just, Tom's little soapbox. In Hebrews chapter 10, verse 25, it says this, and let us not neglect our meeting together as some people do, but encourage one another, especially now that the day of his return is drawing near. Remember, last week we talked about the fact anytime that God gives a command or states a principle, it's because he's either trying to protect us from something or he's trying to provide something for us. So in this situation, he's trying to protect us from something. And what he's trying to protect us from is what happens to our faith when it lives in isolation, or what happens to our faith when we don't put it in the right environment. So let me give you an illustration on this. Most of us, I think, have at some point had a fire, and we've had several different logs that are leaning against each other. I'll just tell you, I'll confess. First service, yesterday morning I said most of us have created a forest fire. And so that's why I stumbled on that one. So we've had this fire, with 4 logs, not a whole forest. And these logs are burning up against each other, and underneath them begin to develop this bed of red-hot coals. And what happens is those coals will bounce up against the wood, and it regenerates the heat that pushes back down on those coals. And so what happens is those logs, being in close proximity to each other, stay hot. And then there comes that time where as the logs begin to burn, one of them kind of snaps and kind of rolls off to the side out by itself. What happened to that log every single time? It dies out. Why? It was not meant to burn by itself. You and I were designed, we were built, we were created for relationships, and we thrive best in the right relationships. And so the reason that we're giving you the challenge to be here every single week in January is because we want you to be in relationship with other people that are pursuing the same relationship you are with Jesus, for the sake of you not being distracted and for you growing from their warmth. So I want to ask you real quick to just think about your relationship with Jesus. What kind of a relationship with him do you want? Do you want your kind of relationship with him, or do you want the relationship with him that he wants with you? So about 30 years ago, back when I was much younger, I was leading a student ministry, and we were having this fun teaching moment. And so it was one of those things where, if you do these things, jump that many cones, and people were jumping all over the room type of a thing. And then it was, clear all the cones. I'm going to ask you one last question, but I want you to listen to the whole question before you move. And so what I said to them is, in just a moment, I'm going to ask you to either run to that side of the room, or I'm going to ask you to run to that side of the room. You're going to choose. And here's the choice. If you come to youth group, if you're a part of the church, if you pray, if you do any of those things in your relationship with Jesus because you do not want to go to hell, I want you to run to that side of the room. Now, if you do those things because the more and more that you have learned about Jesus and the more you understand his deep, passionate love for you and your desire to be in a relationship with him and to be closer to him, then I want you to run to that side of the room, okay? Now, I'm not going to ask you guys to do that because this is a pretty intelligent crowd, for the most part. And you guys would all know to run to that side of the room, but here's what happened. Just about a 50-50 split. Some of them ran over to that side of the room, and some of them ran over to that side of the room. And so I was just looking at the room, and I didn't plan this. I had no idea this was going to happen, but here's what I noticed. Along this wall were only freshmen and sophomores. And on this wall were every single one of my juniors and seniors and one sophomore. And I just found that interesting, and so I started thinking about that, and I have two things that really came out of that for me. One, oftentimes we, the church or church leaders, we make the mistake oftentimes when we teach about Jesus, we often make the mistake of teaching first about the value of avoiding hell rather than the value of falling deeply in love with who he is. Now, again, this is a smart crowd. You guys would know to run to that side of the room, but let me give it to you a different way and just cause you to think for a moment. This side of the room, those who want to avoid hell, they have a relationship with Jesus that mirrors their life insurance agent. Here's what I mean by that. With the life insurance agent, I'm not looking to create special opportunities to hang out with my life insurance agent. I'm not looking for more. I just want one thing. I want, when I pass, I want that person to be there to take care of those that are left behind. So I just, here's the deal. I just give them the minimum due. That's all I do. I give them the minimum due. I got to be honest. You can raise your hand if you want, but I'm guessing none of us in this room have ever sent with our payment an extra $100 bill with a note that said, I just want you to know how much I appreciate you, and I wouldn't want to live life without you. Anybody ever done that with your life? Now, again, if your life insurance agent is your spouse, that doesn't count, but anybody ever done that? Man, third service in a row, nobody, not one. Now, on the other side of the room is a relationship with Jesus that I would describe that is much more like the relationship we have with the person that we love the most in life. It's that person that we just can't spend enough time with. We can't do enough with. I regularly give that person extra gift, not because it's her birthday, not because it's our anniversary, and men, not because I'm apologizing, okay? It's just a gift because I just love her, and I cannot do it. And sometimes I do attach a little note that says, oh, man, I appreciate you more than you know, and I can't imagine living life without you. In fact, I just got to tell you, man, I was super excited yesterday when I got the text that, hey, the plane is still on schedule, and that flight has not been canceled, and I kind of did one of these numbers. Yeah, she's coming. Now, here's the deal. I will do that because I'm not trying to look smooth. I'm not trying to look cool. I'm just saying I love that person so much, there is not enough that I could do with or for that person. What I'm inviting you to is to just look at your life and just go, are you having a relationship with Jesus? It's about the minimum payments. Or do you have a relationship with Jesus that is just so wildly passionate that I thought you just can't get enough of that relationship. You can't appreciate enough everything that he's done for you. Everything that you discover about him goes, man, I just love him more and more. Everything in that relationship just goes, man, I wish I could see myself the way he sees me rather than the way sometimes I do with all of my mistakes and all of my flaws. So again, I just want to invite you to ask yourself, what's the kind of relationship that you want with Jesus? We as the church really want to help you discover that relationship. We as the church want to do things that help you put patterns and practices and habits into your life that help you stay focused so that you can discover more and more about your relationship with Jesus and you don't get distracted. So here's the takeaway. Takeaway for today is simply this. I will choose today to make Jesus the number one priority of my life. Now, one last thing. I honestly believe that if you're not pursuing that relationship with Jesus, you may know about him, but you don't know him. Because I believe it's not possible to fully know Jesus and everything that he had done for you and I, and everything that he wants for you and I, and for our response not to be, I want to lean into that. So that's what we want to invite you into this next year.